and tell you a little bit about what they do, and then we'll get right into it.
Start here?
Yeah, sure.
My name is Malcolm Spall. I'm the chair of the School of Film and Animation at the Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York. I've also been a filmmaker for close to 40 years, but I enjoy maybe even more than making films, teaching and inspiring and working with young.
A series called Explorer for National Geographic. I know Jenks from running the show World of Jenks with him. And before that, I was working with the filmmaker Alex Gibney. He's done movies like Taxi to the Dark Side, and he just did the Scientology movie for HBO. And working with him, bringing series to television. So like The New Yorker Presents is a pilot that's on Amazon, and Death Row Stories is a show on CNN. So that's what I've been up to lately.
Hi guys. Hi, my name is Nick Yellen, and I am the chair of the producing department at New York Film Academy. My background has been primarily as a producer. I produced 5 feature films, starring people like James Franco, Rosanna Arquette. Done a couple of TV movies. I also was an agent representing writers and directors for 10 years. I have sold over 35 feature films. And most recently, I am in the midst of shooting a pilot for a new cooking show. That's my background.
All right, so I'll start off with this question and maybe have each of you give your answer to that. But here at the film festival, as we're watching all of these films by young filmmakers, we always, a lot of times you'll see people focus on the cinematography side of things, or certain aspects of how something may be scored, or other elements of a film. But what we always really like to focus on is the narrative and the story. And so, when we're talking about pre-production and distribution, those kind of things, what are your experiences with the planning that goes into the story? I mean, where do you actually start the process when you're a young filmmaker or an established filmmaker? Where do you believe that the right place to start is?
Young filmmakers inevitably, and it's just natural, don't understand the value of pre-production. Oftentimes they have an opening scene in their head, and that's what they want to go out and shoot. And then they realize, well, I have to tell a story or the rest of a story. So it's a process where they quickly realize that pre-production and the script, if we're talking narrative, and the story is the most important part of the entire filmmaking process. So once they realize that, then it's a matter of them being patient to develop that story and then go through their pre-production. And pre-production is a whole discipline unto itself. So that's our experience overwhelmingly.
I would say it's got to be something that you're really fascinated in, that's going to motivate you, keep you going from what's in the beginning is an idea, but then there's so much hard work involved that it's got to be something you feel passionate about, and also that you have a vision from the beginning all the way to the end. What is the journey going to be over the course of the film, whether it's a documentary or narrative? Because if you don't have that ending in sight, it's hard to get from point A to point B. So. Planning that out, and then being open to many changes along the way that hopefully will be even better than your original idea.
Right.
I'm going to pick up on what you were just saying about passion, because the passion starts here. You can't, as a filmmaker, as a screenwriter, expect to assemble a collaborative team of people who are going to spend conceivably years with your project with you, unless your passion is contagious. So even before it gets on the page, your idea, you better be enthralled by it, or it's probably not worth pursuing. The cliche line of if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage is very much true. It starts with a good script. I've never seen a good movie come from a bad script, ever. I have seen bad movies come from good scripts because too many chefs in the kitchen, but You need to believe in it. This is too much of a commitment from your life, years out of your life, to get on board something that you do not think is fantastic.
One thing that we talked about, we had one of the filmmakers last night at the opening night party and talked about how you're trying to plan your story, especially when it comes down to documentaries, how you think you may have one story in the beginning, and then as you get into the project, that could change significantly. I don't know if you had the same experience when you guys were working on World of Janks, but I'd love to hear from you guys with a lot of the projects. You know, where did they start and where did they end up, and how different was that? You know, how did that impact the pre-production part of things and developing those stories?
Okay, I love that question. Documentary is a journey, and that's narrative film is a journey too. But documentary is a different kind of journey. You often start in a place and you think you're going over here, and you find out through the process that it actually is much more important to go in this direction. And that's one of the wonderful things about making documentary is it's a real learning process. Whether it's a biopic or a documentary about an event or a documentary about a place or a documentary about even an idea, it's a discovery process. And a famous photographer years ago said, "Oh, I hate documentaries. You shoot a lot of stuff and then you make them in the editing room," and that's not true. If you're open and exploring your subject, your documentary takes shape as you're producing it. Of course, a lot has to be cut out, and there's too many documentaries that don't have discipline in their editing. But the documentary process is a wonderful process of discovery.
Yeah, so that was interesting, and it also gave me a second to think about World of Jenks and some of the things that we did. I mean, a couple that leap to mind are, you just have good ideas that pop up while you're doing a documentary. So, as an example, we were working with this guy named D Real, who's this incredible dancer in Oakland, and he like a break dancer, turfing is basically what it's called, and so he and his friends were just amazing characters. But it was like we were in the same environment. It was just this sort of, after a while, it's like we were doing multiple episodes across this series. It's like, okay, well, we're just staying in the same neighborhood, and someone was like, well, I go camping near there. My parents live near there. We go camping. It's not that far. And so Jenks was like, let's do that. Let's go camping. It was like one of the best things in the whole show came out of that. Literally using our associate producers' camping equipment, and those guys, like, they all D-Real and his friends who all danced together, his team. It was just a whole other way of seeing these guys because they were somewhere different, right? And so that became this really fun, interesting way to look at something that characters we thought we knew, but now we found out different things about them because they behave differently. And one more quick example from Jenks is we were following a fashion designer. It was a young woman with cancer, and she would move to New York to pursue her dream of being a fashion designer. And the whole idea was we were going to follow, she was going to have a fashion show in New York, we knew, and we were going to follow that story. And that would be this great culminating end. We see her fashion show in New York. And along the way, she and Jenks, kind of through their own conversations, realized that would be kind of a phony ending, to end just with that triumphant moment. And so instead we ended with the next day when she's feeling really sick, and she's never gonna really be better physically. Like, she's got cancer, it's in remission at the moment, but it can come back at any time. And that was like a very bold Jenks style decision to go with not what had been planned, not what we'd sold the network on, but something that was human and true.
All right, so I can't really speak from experience because I've never made a documentary, but I have many good friends who are documentary filmmakers. And from what I grasp through conversation and observance is most of them are very methodically planned out. They know exactly what they're looking for. They know the story they want to tell. They know what they're trying to get out of their characters. This is not really left up to random events. However, that being said, things do change. It is a medium in which the unexpected happens and you suddenly find yourself going in an entirely different direction. It's an amazing time to be in the world of documentary. I mean, Netflix seems to have, what, thousands of documentaries now? HBO. New York City just built a theater, the documentary-specific movie theater. We're going through a renaissance of documentary filmmaking. It's a great time to be in this. As he mentions, things change. If any of you saw the HBO doc Jinxed, anybody see that?
The Jinx.
The Jinx. Yeah.
Nobody?
Nobody? You guys.
Oh,
I don't want to spoil it for you now.
It's awesome.
It's beyond awesome.
Yeah.
And talk about a moment in a doc that came unexpectedly that changed the entire tone of the piece. This is a perfect example. Please watch it.
and they didn't find it for a year
Yeah.
after they recorded it.
I guess for you, Nick, as a question of being a former agent, are there particular genres of content that would be good for young filmmakers to pursue that maybe buyers on the distribution side are looking for, or are there certain things that you need to consider when developing a project that, because a lot of times, and I, probably none of you have had the experience yet, but when you're going in and meeting with agents about your particular project, there are a lot of things that they'll tell you based on what people are buying and certain formats that are acceptable. I'm just curious if there's anything you could share with young people about what those projects need to include.
I mean, at the risk, I don't want to disillusion anybody who loves dramas, but clearly, from an agent's point of view, they're the most difficult to sell. And agents are in the business not necessarily for art, it is for commerce. They are there to make a living and to maximize the amount of money they can commission and that you can make as a creative in the entertainment industry. So yeah, dramas are complicated. Documentaries are complicated. Very noble, but certainly not with regularity throughout the day. So find an audience, know your niche. And that's the big word today. So many of the companies now are obsessed with marketing, and marketing is expensive. And so in order to use marketing dollars effectively, they want you to know with a clear sense who your audience is. And that's something I'd have you keep in mind when you start to write something, when you start to shoot something. Have a real clear idea of who it is who's going to see your film. Because if you can't accurately convey to the business people in the industry, the producers, the distributors, the financiers, who the audience for your film is, they're going to shy away from it. So as creative as you are at this stage in your life, you have to almost immediately start to think, put on a business cap, because it's as much a business as it is an art form. But that's all I have to say.
I would just add one thing about that, which is that because you can make things and put them on YouTube, it's like you have a cheap way of, obviously you still have to get it done and make it look good, but you do have a way to showcase a little bit of what your vision is, and it doesn't really cost anything to do it. You can show kind of your vibe. It doesn't need to be the actual project you're pitching. But if you've got something that you can say, like, this is the kind of thing I'm into, and people are into it and people are responding to it, that's something that can help, sort of can serve as a demonstration of the kind of where you're going with something, so that then you go in with a really honed pitch, but you might have something that already exists that, could be your passion project, and you hopefully can demonstrate, like, look, just check it out, it worked.
Let me pick up on what he was just saying about YouTube. 10 years ago, no agency on planet Earth had an agent who was devoted to scouring YouTube looking for potential talent. That's what's happening today. I used to work at ICM, a big talent agency. CAA, ICM, William Morris Endeavor, UTA, they all have teams, as many as 10 people, who spend all day long looking for gems on YouTube that they can represent and develop either into a more successful YouTube channel or taking it off YouTube onto television or developing it into a movie idea. So I agree. YouTube is an incredibly inexpensive, very accessible means for you to establish yourself. So don't look down on it.
You want me, I just
Yeah.
wanted to add that, this is all part of the democratization of the industry. For years and years, it was impossible to raise the money for many, many people to mount a production because camera rentals and film costs were so extraordinarily expensive. And what was the distribution? The distribution had to be in these very specific television or theatrical markets. And now, just like they were saying, there is this opportunity to have your vision recorded on a DSLR, edit it on Final Cut, and then put it on YouTube. That's one way to get your work out there. There are other ways, like film festivals, and that's why this is a really super idea, what's happening here this weekend. Our students get more exposure through film festivals than any other means, and they get a lot of opportunity from that. And so this is for high schools. There's obviously professional, independent, college film festivals all over this country.
I was going to talk a little bit about with you guys, because I was an agent at one point myself for CAA, and now I work with a lot of social media influencers as well, and all those agents are scouring the internet looking for the next wave of talent, whether you're a musician, a filmmaker, whatever it may be. But one question I do have, and this is what a lot of big studios are looking at, is how do they market and promote these films? Because they're spending so much on a film, or in some cases they have small budget films, but they don't want to have these huge P&A budgets. How much do you guys feel that social media plays a role in marketing and promoting films? And then I guess the other side of that is how much of that should be thought out in advance and captured during the pre-production process?
I think for smaller films, the kind of films that most of you students will be making in the next couple of years, it's critical, absolutely critical. I know investors who put money into small films. If they don't feel that you have an existing social media reach, if they don't feel you have 1,000 friends on Facebook and you're not they want to feel that you have the built-in ability to market your project from the get-go. So for those of you who have been shunning social media, who feel it's uncool, or you just feel it's too time-consuming, if you're a filmmaker, if you're a producer, if you're a screenwriter, an actor, it's a mistake. Social media has become critical. Marketing costs are the only part of the business that continue to rise every single year. Marketing is becoming cost prohibitive. Anything that you can do on a social media level that enhances your products through your own network of social media becomes a tremendous asset to the people that you're going to involve with your project. And I think it starts in day one, long before you're physically in production. You don't start your social media campaign when you have a finished product. You involve your network in pre-production, maybe even in the development stage. You enlist them as part of your extended family from the very get-go. It's become pivotal. So I couldn't agree more. This is something that if you haven't given much thought to, it's time to rethink.
I would also say with social, like, it's supposed to be social, So like, you should be using the people that you're working with and tapping into their friends. It should be a communal effort. So it's like if you're, it's like, okay, if you're, an introvert and you're a good writer, but you've got less friends than your grandma on Facebook. It's like, okay, but maybe you know someone who's got a ton of friends on Facebook and is like on it all the time and is on whatever, every platform, Instagram, etc. And it's like, well, tap in with that person, and maybe that person can get involved, and maybe that's an actor in your film, or maybe it's a producer on the film. But and you guys can think together about what are ideas that we could do while we're working on the movie. I mean, I was thinking about Stephen Colbert, he in between his gig at Colbert Report and his and taking over for Letterman, he put out these weird ass videos online, you know? They're so weird, they're hilarious, and they're just like, it made you love him during that 8-month period when he was off the air. So it's like you can do things like that for your movie. You can like drop a little snippet of it out there and get people excited and keep them motivated. And that kind of thing really creates a genuine connection between you as filmmakers and the audience. It should be from a genuine place that you want to bring this out to people because you think they will enjoy it.
There's also the idea of making your film specifically for social media distribution, specifically actually for phone. There's an article, I think it was in the New York Times recently, about producing your film in the vertical format so that it can be watched with the phone vertical rather than us filmmakers have worked for entire lives thinking about widescreen. But no, there's another format here where you can actually edit and shoot, edit, and distribute your film all in the vertical format. I don't know anybody who's tried that yet, but it's a fascinating idea.
I guess when you talk about different formats like that, and what is available in the way of distribution for young filmmakers, you know, if you look at platforms like Vine or others where it's solely shot on phones, 6 seconds, but you know, what do you feel are the strongest points of distribution for young filmmakers to look at? I mean, everyone sort of gravitates towards YouTube, but do you come across other platforms that you guys think they should be taking a look at?
Well, it's funny you talk about shooting on an iPhone. One of my professors who works for me, Darren Dean, just shot a film called Tangerine. Maybe some of you have heard of it. Tangerine was one of the hits of Sundance. It was shot on an iPhone 5S. Now, it's an interesting subject matter. It's a comedy about transsexual prostitutes in Los Angeles, and there is Magnolia's distribution is mounting a very aggressive Academy Awards campaign for one of the 2 lead actors, so it could very well go mainstream. The film was made for $60,000, shot on an iPhone. Now, just let me just say, with an adapter lens package, so it's not the iPhone lens you're using on your phone, but it was still, the core mechanism was an iPhone. This is not going to be unusual in the future. I mean, every update to the iPhone today has a better and better camera package. It's going to be, I'm sure, professional level within the next couple of years, if it isn't already. How you shoot, I've always been somebody, I'm not a sucker for technology. You know, my students generally are obsessed with wanting to work with Alexas and the Reds and the most sophisticated digital camera packages that they can have. But the reality is, a good cinematographer with a crappy Canon or an iPhone phone can have a beautiful looking film. The aesthetic is still going to be spectacular. It's the hands the phone is in and not the technology itself. It's a revolutionary time for filmmaking. We talked about the price of making movies plummeting. I mean, and that's truly what's happening. Wouldn't surprise me if somebody starts to make a quality feature-length film for $10,000 in the next 5 years. It's very viable. As far as distribution outlets outside of YouTube or Vine, I mean, the buzzword today that everybody talks about is if it's the second coming of Christ, and the future of our industry is video on demand. And there are so many outlets, so many opportunities to get your films out there into the world. The trick, of course, comes back to marketing, is to create awareness so somebody goes to seek out your film. You know, the ability to have your films accessible around the world is going to be there momentarily, but people still need to go seek it out. They have to be conscious it exists and want to find it. I think it's an exciting time for you guys. You guys are going into a brave new world. The film industry is radically changing, and for the better. When I was your age, the biggest challenge was financing a film. A cheap film for me to make was $500,000. And even though that may not sound like $100 million, it's still a lot of money. And today, that's not an option for you. You guys can go out and make a film for $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. It's an exciting time to be a filmmaker.
Making films, develop friendships for life. They are striving artists who find what they love to do in that process. You can't do everything. And if nothing else, they learn about industry jobs they didn't know even existed until they spent some time on set making films. And this is true for animation as well, by the way. And it's a very difficult thing to make a good film. We are such sophisticated audiences. We've grown up with this. We expect a lot when we sit down, whether it's in a movie theater or whether we're sitting at a computer watching YouTube. We expect a lot. And to understand the art of making a film, the three-act structure of a story, the character development, directing an actor, these are things that take time. So I am making a plug for film schools, but it's if you really have a passion for this, it's something you should really consider.
So speaking about resources then, I guess, of film schools, what are some of the most important things that you find that you'll learn about the pre-production process, about breaking through in an environment of an educational institution versus what you need to look for to learn, through internships and other, relationships that you may build at a film festival or whatnot?
I'm happy to address that too. The bigger picture here is you're 18 years old, you're leaving high school, you're leaving home, and you're going into a new stage in life. And that stage is hopefully going to lead to a degree. And at our university, it's a BFA degree. It could be a BS degree at another university. But the real big picture is it's a bachelor's degree from the state of New York. And so you could spend 4 years, making all kinds of films. And when you graduate, decide, that was fun, but I don't know if I want to do this as a career. And you can go take the LSATs and go to law school because you have a bachelor's degree. That's the first thing, the real big picture. The next thing is this huge amount of development that happens between the ages of 18 and 22. And you're gonna, like I said, make friends for life. If you're gonna be a filmmaker, you have to be somewhat of a Renaissance person. You do have to take classes in anthropology or literature or psychology. These are things that are a little more sophisticated than maybe the courses you have in high school. So it's a process. It's a wonderful time in your life, and I forgot the question. What's the question?
Oh, so we were just talking about what are the things that are most important that you learn in an educational environment versus real-world job experience or internships or just relationships in general.
Well, I sort of addressed that, but I'll just finish by saying, find a film school that has a critical mass of students who will be like you, has courses that interest you, and we could spend an hour just listing what you could learn in film school.
I think people come to film schools with a very set idea of what they think they want to do with their career in entertainment. And having now taught or run a department for almost 7 years, I can tell you that almost every year there's a substantial number of students who come here thinking, I'm going to be a filmmaker. That's what I want to do. And over the course of the first semester or the first year in film school, they're put into environments, shooting projects together collaboratively, where they're having an opportunity to take on positions that they never imagined that they'd be doing. They are gaffers, they are cinematographers, they are editors, they are grips. And they discover that what they thought were their interests or their strengths are not really what their interests or strengths are. And they discover only through the experience of the opportunity at film school and the projects they're working on that there is something else within the entertainment industry that they're even more passionate about. And that discovery only comes about through the opportunity to experience multiple jobs on a film set. What was your question?
Yeah, it was just
Well,
the real world.
Listen, internships are wonderful. My school offers internship. We have an internship program. We're big supporters of getting people into real work environments. But let's not fool ourselves. The average internship, They're giving you relatively menial opportunities to, file paperwork, get coffee, with the opportunity to be present and exposed to the inner workings of a production company or a film set so that you learn through observation. Very, very valuable, but not necessarily as hands-on as a film school opportunity is, where you can truly immerse yourself. The other thing he brings up, which I think is very valuable, is that network. You're spending an inordinate amount of time with a large group of people who fundamentally over time become your family. These people could be here in the United States, they could be spread throughout the world, but this becomes your network, that you take care of each other. You work together after film school. You share opportunities that you hear about to help one another out. The family that you build in film school is an invaluable resource once you're done with film school, getting that first job, getting out into the world itself, breaking through the door. So I think that film school has tremendous advantages over merely an internship.
I just want to do a little say that there are also other ways of getting where you need to go too. So for myself, I was a journalism major. That's what I was interested in, and it's like some girl I met in a bar's boyfriend worked in TV, and that's how I got into TV. It was like I basically had to do a crash course to teach myself all of everything associated with filmmaking, and there is a lot to be said for learning by doing, and I think it's definitely a great thing to go to film school for sure, but it's also great to just make sure that you're getting out there, doing different kinds of internships, looking at different kinds of things that you might be interested in, but there has to be a ton of self-education one way or another. You've got to really educate yourself. Otherwise, you're going to be a bad director of actors. That's not something that just comes from, out of nowhere. It's like you really need to think about it. You really need to understand the craft of acting. Otherwise, usually it's bad acting that you will see in the movie. You have to really work at that, and it takes a while to do. But there are different roads to getting where you need to go.
I mean, every once in a while, there's this young student, and it might be some of you, who are you're self-starters. You're incredibly disciplined. You're very focused. You're on point. And that's fantastic. But for most 18-year-olds, and this is not meant to be an insult, it's just a reality of being 18. I was this way too. We don't have the discipline or the structure. We may have the ambition, we may have the desire, but structure and discipline is so critical to learning and improving. And I believe that film schools, that's one of their greatest values, is putting you into an environment. You have to meet your deadlines. People are looking over your shoulder, coddling you along, pushing you forward, making sure the work gets done until it becomes organic for you and you're doing it yourself. And then you can carry that out of school.
I want to add to that because it's right on point. And one more thing about that is that, you've heard this before. Art is 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration. It's so true for filmmaking. Our students, they're going to shoot 8 pages of a script. They have to be at the equipment cage when it opens at 8 in the morning, collect 2 carloads worth of gear, get out to location. They spend 14 hours, 15 hours shooting. They go home, they collapse, they get up on Sunday, they do another 15-hour shoot. This is one thing, we don't have any unions governing length of labor in film school. And they do it the following weekend. The point about this is, if you don't have a passion for this and you aren't willing to put in that kind of commitment, then it really is not going to work. I often joke that I know our film students party, I just don't know when they party, because their weekends are spoken for. So it's something, when you go there, you have to be, you're not going to be a dilettante and write some great thing that other people are going to do for you. It doesn't work that way. You get your hands dirty all the time.
So you talk a lot about work ethic, filmmakers that are great work probably harder than a lot of the others. I guess one question for each of you would be, whether it's as a filmmaker yourselves, mentor, educator, what are things that you think, as someone's becoming a young filmmaker and looking to be an established filmmaker, what are pivotal things that impact their projects that they need to think about when you're talking about pre-production, distribution? Are there certain things that stand out that maybe you had an experience with a project of your own or a project with one of your students that comes to mind that's, God, I wish someone would have told me about that earlier so that I would know going into the projects that's something I need to be thinking about?
Well, for a filmmaker, it's putting your ego in check and recognizing that you don't know it all, and that this is a collaborative medium. And it's in your best interest to work with people who are adept at what they're doing. You know, they say there can only be one weak link in a chain, and for a young filmmaker, that's probably going to be you. So surrounding yourself with people who have more experience than yourself, so that you can be supported. And remembering that this is stressful, this is chaotic, this is a difficult business. It's glamorous, it's sexy, it's fun, but it's hard. And you need to be able to rely on people and trust people and instill confidence in people who early in their career never behave that way. This is something that unfortunately they evolved into. But in the beginning, this really is, you can't have such tunnel vision that you're shutting out people.
And also, just to be clear though, it's way more fun being collaborative. I just want to point out how that's like the great joy of doing this. It's like when I'm on set, and and I do narrative stuff as well. Like I've been doing a bunch of comedy stuff and working with some very cool companies I can't talk about yet in New York with this. And it's like, it's a joy to work with an actor who's got a better idea than you. And it's great to see a makeup artist who does something that you weren't expecting. And it's awesome to have a cinematographer, offer a new idea or do something better than you thought. I mean, on a narrative film, I did a narrative short that got a lot of exposure film festival wise. And this scene that I thought was, dramatic, the editor cut it in a comic way, and it got huge laughs. And it's like, I wouldn't have, we didn't know going in that scene was going to be funny, but it was. So it's like, it's great to have that interaction is like what you have if you're like play sports and you're on a team, or if you're in a band, or it's like, that's the greatest thing in the whole world, is that sense of collaboration and that you're in it together and that it's not just you. And I mean, I've interviewed, for example, like Quentin Tarantino, and it's like, he's portrayed often as like this guy with this total vision from start to finish, and yeah, he is like that, but he loves ideas from his actors. He loves to to bandy things about. He's incredibly like warm and back and forth, is like that. He loves doing that. It's like, it's so important to think of it that way. That's the fun of it. The fun of it isn't like, I'm going to be the dictator and this is going to be my thing and I'm going to do it the way I demand. It's like, the fun is, I've got a vision. I think this will be really cool. Do you think so? And then getting people to do it. It's like, that's the whole fun of it.
There are a lot of very well-respected directors who, first couple of takes, it's their way. And then they'll turn to their lead actor and say, do it your way, and give them a shot to, and sometimes that's what they end up keeping. My favorite commencement speech is as follows. About 3 years ago, the former head of CAA, Ron Meyer, he was the president of CAA. He went on to become president or chairman of Universal Studios. And he was invited by UCLA Film School to give a commencement speech to the graduating undergrad class. And these commencement speeches are meant to be inspirational. They're meant to take people who've just spent 4 years in school and are going out into the real world, and to keep them motivated and inspired and passionate, and not to flounder now that school is over. That's what they're intended to do. And Ron Meyer gave what was perhaps the shortest commencement speech in the history of entertainment commencement speeches. goes up to the microphone, taps it, looks at the audience head on, and says, "We have enough assholes in this business. Don't be one." And he puts the mic back and he walks away. And that's the entire commencement speech. I guess why I bring that up is one of the things that I would encourage you is to be a good guy, be a good woman. Don't treat people terribly. You will have so much respect. People will go the extra mile for you as a filmmaker. You want to abuse them with time. You want to make them work 18-hour days. If you're treating them with respect, they'll do so willingly. If you're difficult, if you're a dictator, if you're toxic on a film set, don't be surprised if you find your crew about to mutiny. It's so important to be a good guy in this business. It'll give you a long career.
Social skills.
To your friends about that particular type of production, but be open to almost anything at this point.
I would also say be open to different kinds of positions as you whatever kind of experience you can get. It's like maybe it's with editing, with shooting, with writing, trying different things and seeing what suits your personality best. Not everyone is going to actually end up as a major director, but like being a great editor is an amazing thing, and it's a job that's a heck of a lot less stressful than being the director. So some people find that they're storytellers, but that's how they want to be storytellers. Maybe, they write 10 scripts and they read them all and they're like, they're really not that great. So, but maybe they're great at telling stories in an edit room. There's a lot of ways to go to figure out what you do best and just try different things along the way.
Also, guys, realize once you're if you do go to film school, even when you graduate, unless your family is financing your first feature film, the odds are you are not going to be given an opportunity to direct a feature right out of film school. Maybe a couple of short films, but not a feature. And you need to gain experience, and you need to network, and you need to make contacts. So the more versatile you are, the more jobs on a film set that you're capable of handling will be ways to support yourself in the interim, meet people. Of course, you'll be telling everybody you're a filmmaker, and eventually an opportunity will become available to you. But the more things that you're able to do, and again, touting the horn of film schools, where you're given an opportunity to try on a lot of different hats, you can't limit yourself to just focusing in on just being a director. You have to diversify. Being an editor, fantastic.
And just not to forget writing. If you have any interest or talent as a writer, there are a lot of writers who then became directors. So if you're thinking about that as an ultimate goal, and you can develop your writing skill, you're not going to sell a script when you're 23 years old. You don't have enough life experience. But if you stay with it and you develop as a writer, you talked about what's happening now, what's emerging, long-form narrative. Breaking Bad, Homeland. These aren't 2-hour feature films. These are 10 hours. People are writing them in teams. There's so much more opportunity now for writers than there has been in the past.
Yeah, and if you're a good writer, by the way, it just helps you everywhere in the business. I mean, so in my field, just being able to write a treatment about something, if you want to pitch a documentary about this, or you want to pitch a reality show, just to be able to write one page and make it compelling and make it interesting and get people excited. It's like, that's hard to do. It takes some practice to do that. But if you can do that write one good page, you're sort of beating 9 out of 10 people out there, I think, because most people can't do that.
Also, for those of you who are wed to the idea of feature film, please be open-minded to television. There are over 250 television networks that buy original content, both scripted and unscripted. There are innumerable opportunities for directors to work regularly in television. It doesn't mean give up your dreams of becoming a feature film director. Just don't thumb your nose up at television. The goal is to break in, to get your foot in the door, and to start working.
So before we jump into the questions, I just want to sort of recap for you guys just to make sure some of the key takeaways. seems like when you look at pre-production and distribution, you know, as young filmmakers having access to technology, you should explore every method of distribution, every format, every length of format. Don't be afraid to take on any type of role with any production if it gives you additional experience that may lead to other opportunities down the line. I think, you know, formal education, there's a lot you can learn about certain elements of pre-production and post-production and distribution, and probably much, much more that you should want to explore and be willing to explore. Even though you may have success early on with a project, I think it's still great to have formal education as part of that. And then I think lastly, or actually two other things. One, be very diligent about what you do in social media. It's a huge component of everything moving forward. It can actually help you get your projects financed much quicker than if you don't have that. And people are willing to make a bigger bet on you if you do have a community around you. And that sort of leads into the last thing, which is make sure you're collaborating as much as possible with as many people as possible. And that's sort of one element of us bringing you all together as part of the festival. And we have a networking event later tonight that will allow you to do that a little bit more. So hopefully this was a great session for you guys, and I'd like to open it up to any questions you might have.
Yes. In the beginning, we were talking about agencies and stuff of that nature, and how they have so many people dedicated to find people on YouTube and different social media platforms. Is there a way to kind of send your creations or content that you created to them, for them to then see and process? Even though it might be a no, is there a way of doing that?
Yes, you can do it, but it won't be very effective. What they're looking for is they want to go to your YouTube channel or whatever page you have and see that you have 300,000 followers. That's what's going to impress them. It's the numbers. So would they take a look at it, and could it bowl them over and be very impressed? Yes, but really what's going to impress them the most is knowing that you've come up with a concept that is working. There's proof in concept. You have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers following what you're doing. That's what's going to cement their interest.
And try to just get some buzz around it, you know, so it's like people writing about the thing that you created is probably more effective than going right to them. In other words, if you want to go to if you do go to them, you want to go to them with, look, these people reviewed it, and look, it's been shared all over here and here and here, and it's got this many followers, and all that becomes more appealing than just, you know, evaluated for the sake of its own art. That's, for an agency, probably not the first thing they're going to look at.
So it's always better to be discovered. So if you can
Yeah.
create an environment in which they hear through the grapevine, or there's buzz about you and they seek you out, you're in a much better position than knocking on their door unannounced.
It's definitely.
I was just going to add one thing to that. When I was at CA, getting unsolicited material was pretty much an everyday thing. I have probably 1,300 invitations sitting in my LinkedIn from people who sent me stuff that was just overwhelming to get, and everyone thinks their project's the best. So yeah, I mean, having a built-in following is probably a great way to go about doing that. Next question.
We made a film that we can't release because we're staying into film festivals. We had a buzz, like we had an audience, we had people that donated to actually make it. But since we can't release it until like 2 months from now, how do we keep that kind of interest for the film through social media?
I mean, just in terms of like your own your community, you mean in between now and when it comes out?
Yeah, it's a while. It's like 2 months.
Does it have a website?
Yes.
Okay, do you have a trailer on it? Can you do that?
Yes. I mean, it's 8 minutes, so it's really hard to kind of not show the whole story in a trailer. But
Well, you can you can cut a trailer that get people excited without revealing anything.
Yeah, do a 30-second trailer, do an interview with the filmmaker, have a big party, like, you know, you can just do stuff and kind of space it out over time.
Just don't let the momentum die. So every week, just do something that keeps people invested in your project.
So overall, I've heard that like building an audience seems to be a very beneficial thing. But in order to do so I've been told they need to have consistent content and constantly making and putting them out there. But also I've been told that film school is a great opportunity, but in order to get that into film schools, you need to have good grades as well. How do you balance all of your time between filmmaking and academics? Which do you think is the priority?
To get into film school?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you our story. We're extremely competitive program. We have close to 500 applications for 60 to 70 seats. And it doesn't mean that everybody we accept comes, so maybe they have a formula in admissions, it's like accept 110 and close to 60 or 70 will come. So it's a pretty competitive environment, 5 to 1, 4 to 1, something like that. We can't look at 500 portfolios. We have a hard enough time going through 150 portfolios for our graduate program that we have to look at. So the admissions is totally divorced from us. It's central admissions in the institute, which is ranking class, grade point average, SATs, ACTs, extracurricular activities. So for us, the most important thing is a good high school record. And I've said this often, but I know we miss some good potential filmmakers who are late bloomers, had serious hiccups in high school. They're not accepted into our program. But we get really smart, motivated, time management skills. We get great students, so we're not going to fix something that's not broken. That's our particular program. There are others that do look at portfolios, but we don't.
Yeah, I think if you're academically minded, it's like I would still try to pull those good grades and, you know, try to allot your time so that you're able to do stuff and carry it out successfully, like, you know, hone your ambitions so that they're doable. You know what I mean? So it's maybe a short rather than a feature length, you know, thing, and, you know, just sort of tailoring what you do to the life you actually lead. You know, you'll have time later to make that feature film if it's like the worst, you know, marking period you've ever had or something like that. Just, you know, just stick it out through that and then make the film over the summer or something like that.
That's not to say, by the way, that, you know, if you win an award like in this festival, or you've obviously had your stuff out there and there's been recognition, that would influence, I would think, the admissions process. So that is possible.
The most challenging thing for my students is the word he used, time management. You don't have enough hours in the day. Film school is very demanding. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We have students who sometimes think that our schools are based in Los Angeles and New York, very desirable cities for people to want to live in. And they think they're going to have a fun time. It's going to be a honeymoon. They're going to spend whether they're taking a 2-year master's program or a 4-year BFA, that it's going to be a piece of cake. They'll be surfing at the beach. They'll be going